I would be much better off. I find it amazing he thinks that I'm running my whole Navy, or the whole Navy, out of my office. No, no. But I am saying that as you move women into the forces, they have to be treated as equals. If you're going to treat them as second-class sailors, then it's not going to work. Everybody's got to be on the same team and work for the same flag. And this is about everybody pulling their own oar equally. Well, and so they have to treat that way.
Lehman's pretty tough. He also says that Admiral Border was driven to his death by a relentless lynch mob. And in that lynch mob, he includes extremist wings of the feminist and gay movements. Are you an extremist feminist?
I don't think so. And let me say, first of all, how very sad I am about Admiral Borda's tragic death. It's almost an Oriental sense of honor that he seemed to have handed up, and we don't see that very often. It's really awesome to Americans to try and deal with that. But secondly, let me also say that because Admiral Border was not part of the ring knockers or the guys who went to the academy, and the first one who wasn't, he also came from the bottom up, and he also is the first who's really made his main career surface Navy and personnel. He's the first one who really focused on Navy families, Navy housing, child development centers, all the things that the Navy's been way, way, way behind. But you know how it goes. People kind of say, well, they're Mon-Li-Mon and they're Girly-Mons, and you just don't deal with personnel issues and rise to the top. It's not considered a force enhancer. I think he did some terrific
Congresswoman Schroeder, in response to Sam, you said, in effect, well, what can one little old legislator do? One that we had on our introductory piece to our show today, Stan Arthur, and it was one senator in response to one constituent who seems to have ended the career of a man who was slated to be head of the Pacific Forces simply because he did not overturn a flight instructor's negative ruling on a female aviator candidate. Now, isn't that something akin to McCarthyism, since he did not really have a chance to answer the charges even?
Well, first of all, I'm not in the Senate, as you know, and we don't deal with promotions in the House, so I don't think he can say that I did that. But the senator But the senator who made that charge, obviously there's two choices. There's the choice of come forward and say this wasn't that big a deal and answer the charge and put it in perspective, or just let the senator have their way. And if they didn't want to come forward and fight the charge, it's almost like they admit it. It's like they're pleading no contest. So you can't just say, wait a minute.
But that's the point, is that they're saying it's not, they're either confirming it or they're bowing to political correctness.
Well, I don't think that's bowing to political correctness. If he indeed did do that, that's very serious. Now, if he had a reason for doing that, then he should come forward and state it. And if he doesn't come forward and state it and confront the senator and solve that problem, he's pleading no contest.
In an interview with the Washington Times, Secretary of Defense Perry said he had written a letter to the Senate Armed Services Committee asking that they stop the practice of flagging the records of officers slated for promotion who had been at the Tailhook Convention. I gather the committee indicates it has not received such a letter and that it might not be well received if it did get there. Do you think they should stop that practice as a way of putting Tailhook behind us?
Look, they flag things for all sorts of reasons. I think what they need to do is allow people the chance to answer. There are some people who may not have really been involved in it. They have the right to state that. If they were very actively involved in it, then I think that becomes part of their record they can't deny. Otherwise, you're saying this isn't important. You know, dealing with women and how they're treated in the military just isn't important, and we're just going to brush it aside. And that would be a terrible message, too.
Ms. Schroeder, thank you. Thanks very much for coming in and being with us today. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Coming next, the former Secretary of the Navy, John Lehman, in a moment.
As the sun rises all around the globe, it brings a new day. One with new possibilities in the world of finance that never existed before. Because now, there's a new company. One that believes that every client is unique, as is every solution. If that hadn't already been our strength, we would never have become who we are today. A new company called Chase. Good morning.
No matter what kind of call your business makes, AT&T stands behind it. This is the most powerful communications network in the world. And if your call ever runs into trouble, the network sends you around it. Or if a cable gets cut, it won't affect you. No other network handles so much business, and no other network guarantees all of it. Only AT&T stands behind every kind of call your business makes. Where does your phone company stand? AT&T, for the life of your business.
This Week with David Brinkley will continue in a moment. After this, from our ABC stations.
This week, we're moving to our new home, and you're invited. It's a whole new look, a whole new way to start your day. Join Joan, Charlie, Spencer, and our new news anchor, Elizabeth Vargas. Something big's happening on Good Morning America this week.
I don't blame you for being turned off by politics. During the last campaign, there were times I hardly recognized myself. So why am I running again? It all comes down to the future of our families. Like most of you, I have a terrific family, a wonderful wife, and 3 great kids in Oregon public schools. To build better lives for them, we need a lot more Oregon common sense in Washington. In the coming weeks, listen to my ideas for the future and get to know the Gordon Smith you didn't get to know before.
If you've always thought that steel chainsaws were the best, but a little too expensive, maybe you don't have the whole picture. During Steel Spring Sale, you'll find chainsaw prices starting as low as $199.95. And Steel puts the same quality into their line of trimmers and brush cutters. Here's good news. Steel gas trimmers are now on sale starting at $139.95 at a Steel dealer near you.
In Portland, Stark Street Lawn and Garden, Wayne Saw Shop Amboy, and Columbia Feed and Supply in Scappoose.
Wes Cooley's Challenge, Monday on Channel 2 News at 5.
Mr. Lemon, thank you for coming. Very glad to have you with us today. You know everybody here, Sam, George, Cokie. Now, what about the remark that Admiral Borda was driven to death by a lynch mob? Can you describe the content of that mob? Who was in it?
Well, it was a description of what's been going on for the last 5 years. As Patsy Schroeder said, Tailhook was worth a week's story. And yet, 5 years later, here we are, almost 5 years later, from the time that story broke, and 14 admirals have been cashiered, 300 naval aviators have been driven out of the Navy or their careers terminated. It has been one scandal, one character assassination after another. All the media seems to have focused on this as the big story. And I think Mike took this very much to heart. He felt it was his Navy, his sailors being impugned. And I think it has many parallels to what happened to Jim Forrestal, former Secretary of the Navy, when he was driven out of office and committed suicide in a similar atmosphere. And that's what I think is terribly damaging to the very fiber of the Navy as an institution, this continuing attack from so many quarters.
Sam?
Secretary Lehman, Gregory Vista, the Newsweek reporter, begins his book about the Navy, Fall from Glory, by describing a disgusting scene in which he claims that at a tailhook convention in the mid-'80s, you, as Secretary of the Navy, were lying flat on your back on a floor in one of those bacchanal suites, performing a spectacular act with a woman. Now, is that true? Did that happen?
Sam, I think the incident he was talking about was 1981, and I think if I had been performing those kinds of acrobatics in public, that an intrepid reporter like you would have sniffed it out far sooner than this. I think it's a perfect example of the depths that coverage of the Navy has fallen to. Every Navy leader of recent times, and now every senior admiral, has been subjected to this kind of gutter reporting.
Do I take it, Mr. Lehman, that you was saying it didn't happen? I mean, you're flatly denying it.
I am flattered by the attention, Sam, 15 years after, and at the risk of hurting my reputation in some quarters, I have to say that the description is far more lurid than the fact.
So we're quibbling over details now. You're not flatly denying it.
Well, Sam, I think, you are exactly making my point. This is what you think is really important, and the kind of focus of journalism that, you know, 20 years ago, the kinds of people that you're sourcing, I mean, 6 of your stories on 2020 have come out of this left-wing group that went after Borda. These kinds of people couldn't have been towel boys at ABC 20 years ago. What's happened to you guys?
Well, let me talk about the relentless attack on Borda. Along with the feminist groups you say were there and the people of political correctness in the White House, you mentioned the Senate Armed Services Committee. Now, you're talking about Senator Nunn, Senator Thurmond, Senator McCain, Senator Warner. Who on the Senate Armed Services Committee do you think leads this relentless attack on the Navy?
I'm saying who on the Senate Armed Services Committee stood up when they should have stood up out of pure decency. Here are the careers of over 300 patriotic kids and men and admirals being ruined without due process, and not one of them stood up and said, enough. Basic decency demands. At this very minute, there are 90 naval aviators' careers on hold because the Armed Services Committee has this policy of tagging anybody that was even attended to tailhook. That's outrageous.
Mr. Lehman, I just want to get back to something you just said to Sam. You said this is the kind of thing you think is important. Do you think it's not important if, in fact, a Secretary of the Navy was lying on a floor with a nude woman over him and other people in his command around the room watching?
First of all, I think that what happened 15 years ago at a convention is certainly a matter of passing interest, but to be the focus, as this has been, for every single aspect, every senior Navy leader has had this kind of a microscope put on them as if this was the story. This is ridiculous. There are important things going on, and this is
not important.
No, I don't think it is important.
Do you think women should be in the Navy?
Yes, I do think women should be in the Navy, but I don't think there should be double standards. I've flown with women aviators who are every bit as good pilots as any male aviator I've flown with.
And do you think
what I object to is this administration has been putting in, quote, gender norming, lowering the standards because, for instance, women are said not to have the same upper body strength, so for infantry training they have lower standards. I think that kind of thing is very subversive and is setting back the cause of women in the military.
Well, General Traynor has an article today in the newspaper where he says the problem the Navy's having is that it needs more brains these days than brawn, given the new technology. Do you think that that is something that might argue for having more women in the Navy?
Well, I think that women should be allowed into the jobs. I don't believe in artificial barriers by groups, and I think where people can qualify, they have what it takes, whether it's brains or brawn for the job that is required, they ought to be allowed in that. But to pretend that the introduction of women into ships that deploy for 6 months into aviation squadrons is not going to be very difficult to assimilate and take time is being very naive. And we have to remember that the Navy's job, first and foremost, is to protect this country from violent people like Saddam Hussein and like a lot of other troublemakers around the world. And that has to be kept in the forefront. And the introduction of women and the other socially desirable changes have to be integrated without totally undermining that capability.
Mr. Lehman, Congresswoman Schroeder used a telling phrase. She talked about cracking the culture of the Navy. Now, I gather you, from a quite different point of view, also agree there's something wrong with the Navy. You would agree, I gather, that Jim Webb was right, another Secretary of the Navy, when he said in his celebrated Naval Academy speech that the men, including men in uniform, had committed the ultimate disloyalty of not standing up for the naval aviators and the others under attack. Why has this happened? That at the senior levels of the Navy, you don't have people who will fight for other people at the senior levels?
Well, I think there has been a lot of people fighting behind the scenes, but the problem is you have a policy set at the top, at the White House in this case, that political correctness and the the social aspects of the military is really the primary focus. And it is the White House that has set the parameters, that have yanked all these people off promotion boards, that have imposed a whole new, for instance, fitness reporting system that gives a much higher valuation to these kinds of politically correct normings rather than warfighting capability.
Let me ask you about the Naval Academy. When you were Secretary of the Navy, you asked me to serve on a committee headed by Admiral Stockdale to look at the curriculum of the Naval Academy because you felt, and correct me if I'm misdescribing your impulse, because you felt that in the post-Rickover Navy it was too much of a naval of technocrats and physics students and all, and not enough of a culture of warriors and leaders. Do you think that's still a problem?
I think it's still a problem, but I think that the problems of the Naval Academy are no worse than the other academies, and inherent in the fact that you're trying to combine two very, very difficult challenges of educating on the one hand and indoctrinating in the military skills on the other simultaneously. But the Naval Academy has the biggest problem because it's only 40 minutes from the Beltway, and so everybody wanting a story can just drive over for the weekend, take a sail, and talk to one of their sources. So it's put the Naval Academy in a very unfair spotlight, and their problems are real, but no worse than the other academies by any means, and far better than any of the best civilian institutions.
Mr. Lehman, thank you. Thanks very much for being with us today. Pleasure to have you.
Pleasure.
Coming next, our discussion here among ourselves, and I think it's very likely we'll hear something or other about the messy campaign for president and other matters in a moment.
Its roomy interior can accommodate 3,000 comfortably. It boasts advanced safety features, ergonomically designed control panels, and a superior ventilation system for cleaner air. Announcing Ford Motor Company's state-of-the-art assembly plants. All the enhancements we made for the people in here may be appreciated most by the people in here. Ford, quality is job one.
Craig Lambert isn't too worried about how to invest for Zach's college education. That's because he works with a broker from Dean Witter. Together, they developed a long-term investment plan to help take Zach wherever he wants to go.
Clients feel most comfortable with our ability to see things from their perspective.
Now, when Craig looks into his son's eyes, he can see the future and smile. Dean Witter.
We measure success one investor at a time.
The event is a canoe-kayak slalom race. We built an entire new river in the middle of wilderness. No water, no electricity. Xerox has produced these documents. The large format documents showed all the elements on it. We're all working on the computers, so when we come out here, all the plans come together on the wide format documents. When the water was released, it's awesome. The athletes are just ecstatic. They take the same site plan, get down to the river, and see how they're going to take that turn around that gate.
Xerox and the Olympic Games, a simpler way to do good work.
As the official airline of the 1996 Olympic Games, Delta is setting the pace for business travelers with an event of its own, the Around the World Relay. It's a team event, coordinating thousands of flights a day to cities throughout the world. So you can go from one plane to another, one place to another, in record time. Delta Airlines.
ABC Sunday, a forbidden affair.
To the best summer ever.
A deadly obsession.
It's time everyone knows the truth!
Susan Lucci, Barry Bostwick, in a story inspired by actual events, caught between love and hate. ABC Sunday.
Monday. Mr. Clint Eastwood. It's a star-studded event as Hollywood honors an American hero. Join your host, Jim Carrey, for a memorable event.
Thank you very much.
The American Film Institute salute to Clint Eastwood. ABC Monday.
Before we go on to other questions, let us have a quick take on what we've just heard about the Navy's problems. George, beginning with you.
Well, there is clearly a disconnect between the journalistic culture in this town and the military, in part because we now, so few Americans now we have volunteer forces, have experience in the military. I was struck, David, when we had the argument a few years ago over homosexuals in the military. I thought the tone of the coverage was colored somewhat by the fact that a Washington journalist is much more apt to have friends who are homosexuals and friends who are in the military. And so there's a kind of incomprehension here. The military has its problems with the Navy. My goodness, the tempo of operations, David, is higher in many ways than it was at the height of the Cold War. The deployments are longer. And when someone like Congresswoman Schroeder talks about cracking the culture of the Navy, she's talking about cracking the culture of an institution that has won our wars, and we should crack it very carefully.
You know, George, it never occurred to me to add up my friends on that basis, but let me say, I'm afraid the disconnect is... Well, the disconnect is between the old Navy and the new Navy. One man who represented the new Navy, unfortunately, is no longer with us, Admiral Borda. I interviewed Admiral Borda last February on a piece that we were doing on Primetime Live about sexual harassment in the Navy. And I thought that he was the guy who wanted to get the problem solved. I thought his heart was in the right place from the standpoint of wanting to correct this. I sincerely believe that. Yet we heard today the old Navy, Secretary Lehman, who's no longer there. No big deal, he says. I mean, that's the wrong thing to concentrate on. He's wrong. If you go down that road of the past, when it comes to women, when it comes to the form of the service, Navy's through. Not just with journalists, George, with the American public.
Well, that's it. I mean, Sam Nunn, I think you can say, is not part of the journalistic culture in Washington. And he recently lectured the current Secretary of the Navy of not being too favorable to the top guns. There is a culture that, yes, has won wars, but it's also had some outrages. And I think that the Navy several times in its history had to have people from the top say, wait a minute, time to make some adjustments to the culture here. That was certainly true when it came to integration of blacks into the Navy, which was very difficult for the Navy to do. And it's clearly the case with the integration of women into the Navy. I think that that's why we have civilian control of the military, is so that, yes, we want them to fight our wars, but we wanted to do it in a way that is honorable and in a way that the American tradition can respect.
By the way, I just was reminded, Admiral Arthur did stand up. He did answer questions before Senator Durenberg, over 200 questions, according to the Naval Information Officer, Admiral Pease. So it wasn't just a case, as Pat Schroeder said, of the Navy immediately folding its tent on him. Although Admiral Borda said before he died that he was sorry he'd made a mistake in not backing Admiral Arthur even harder.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning just quickly, too, that in recent reports we've gotten is that from his assistant, that what things was most troubling to Admiral Borda before he died was a letter in the Navy Times from somebody making exactly the same kinds of points that we just heard from Mr. Lehman.
Published anonymously. May I just ask the Navy Times where it gets off publishing a letter anonymously, withholding the name, when it was that kind of letter, derogatory, little Mickey Borda? I mean, I think the Navy Times, we're talking about journalists and all of us, it should re-examine its policies.
Probably nobody challenged them, but let's go on. What has been taking place in our country has taken place so gradually that we do not realize we no longer have political campaigns as we used to have. The town square making a speech and passing out free drinks and free food and giving presents to the kids and knocking on doors and passing out pamphlets praising the candidate. We don't do that now. Why? Because we are doing commercials instead, television commercials. For example, like this. We have two here that we think you might like to look at, if you will put them up.
He told us he would lead. He told us he could do his job and run for president, that he was a doer, not a talker. Then he told us he was quitting, giving up, leaving behind the gridlock he helped create, and now all he offers are negative attacks. Meanwhile, the real work goes on, balancing the budget, protecting Medicare, education, environment, reforming welfare, cracking down on violent crime by a leader whose proven actions speak louder than words.
Bill Clinton. He's really something. He's now trying to avoid a sexual harassment lawsuit, claiming he's on active military duty. Active duty? Newspapers report that Mr. Clinton claims as Commander-in-Chief, he's covered under the Soldiers and Sailors Relief Act of 1940, which grants automatic delays in lawsuits against military personnel until their active duty is over. Active duty? Bill Clinton. He's really something.
That's the new campaigning, the way it's done now. another way that we haven't shown you here and won't today is to mail a video cassette for you to play at home on your own television set. It is, of course, flattering to whomever sends it. What do you think of that? Is that a way to run a political campaign, Sam?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm sorry, but it is. Television is what drives us now. Television is what reaches the mass audience. David, those days of the town square passing out pamphlets, they're gone, and they're never going to come back. And so they put on the ads. Now, the thing that strikes me about those two ads is, yeah, Dole was a quitter. He quit the Senate. But the ad seeks to depict him as a quitter in the sense of lack of courage, lack of commitment, and of course, that's
wasn't
nonsense.
that rather silly?
That's nonsense. Bill Clinton, as we heard earlier, his lawyer, Bob Bennett, who probably wishes now he'd never heard of the Soldiers and Sailors Relief Act, was not seriously saying that the president was trying to hide behind that act. He was citing, as we heard, one example of how laws affect these things. And so Bill Clinton is not hiding behind the Soldiers and Sailors Relief Act. But it's all fair.
President Clinton, here's the language from the brief. President Clinton here thus seeks relief similar to that which he says, to which he may be entitled as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, and which is routinely available to service members under his command.
I say Bob Bennett has got the sheets over his head this morning saying, what happened to my senses?
You know, one of the interesting things about this ad, the Republican ad, is that it's even a step further in the kind of campaigning that you're talking about, David, because they don't have any money right now to put that ad on television stations around the country, which is what you would expect to get out to the mass of people you were talking about. So really, they're running that ad for us to run it on a program like this and on the news programs so that people see it for free. And that they then get the benefit of us talking about the ad, putting the ad out, and don't even have to spend the money to pay for the ad. So it's yet another dimension of this whole process.
I don't mind accommodating them.
No, Dole's not a quitter. I mean, the interesting thing about the continuing Dole campaign, though, is that he's left the Senate. Now he's free to be himself, and he's not chained to the Democrats' ability to tie up his agenda. But what is he doing? What is he saying? I love this little cartoon in the paper. I wish I could remember who drew it and give him credit. 2 panels. Dole, remember, went to Chicago and he had an open shirt and he had a sports jacket. First panel shows Dole coming in the door with his open shirt and sports jacket and said, boy, I'm glad to be home after a day of campaigning. I want to slip into something comfortable. Second panel shows him in his blue suit and red tie watching television. His idea of something comfortable.
Well, that's what makes him comfortable.
Well, but that's
George,
it. He's
what do you
too
think about this?
He's not a quitter. He's stiff.
Now, this surely, we always say this is the silly season. The silly season gets longer and longer and longer in Washington, but clearly we're waiting for the sides to engage, and the Republicans are having trouble figuring out how to engage a man who simply will not quit coming toward them, toward the right. So they're looking for ways to flank Bill Clinton on the right. Bill Clinton is running a more conservative campaign than George Bush ran in '92 or than George Bush ran in 1988. It's a phenomenon.
Well, Clinton did not mention the fact that he's antagonized the gay community recently. And how much damage is that going to do him, Cokie?
Well, but that's all part of what George was just saying, of moving to the right. He said that he would sign a bill that's working its way through the Congress that is called the Defense of Marriage Act. I think many of us wives are for that. But
you hire press agents to think up titles
they
like
do.
that.
I think the idea is to declare marriage a union between male and female, one of each, and to say that states don't have to recognize any other kinds of unions if other states do. The president says he's going to sign that because he doesn't disagree with the idea that marriage is a union of male and female, a radical thought, and he has alienated some people in the gay community, but frankly there's the view that they have no place else to go, and that it might do him some political good to have that alienation.
But that's it, Cokie. With few exceptions, I think the president simply stands for whatever he and his pollsters think is popular at the moment, rather than for some core set of beliefs in which he says, I don't care whether it's popular, it's the right thing to do. So far, according to the polls, it's working brilliantly. I don't know about November, but at the moment.
George?
Well, the open question is, how far can he move without infuriating his base? And evidently, his base is going to follow him right along. It's interesting that this is the first president
Where can his base go?
Well, that's the point. This is the first Democratic president since Franklin Roosevelt not to have a serious fractioning within the party as he sought election or re-election. Go all the way back through
Well,
Truman.
also they've learned what it's like to have a Republican Congress, and they're keeping quiet.
Another surprising piece of news this week, Hillary Clinton announced that she would love to have another baby.
And he looks around, hoping for help.
No, I don't need any help. I thought maybe you might have some thoughts on this.
Well, it's an interesting career move, and it's very good. It's very good of the First Lady to alert us that they're planning this, because we're all involved. As she says, it takes a village. Well, it takes a village to raise her children, she says, or all our children, and the village, as she describes it in that thin little book of hers, looks rather like the entire nation is implicated in raising these children. So we all ought to get ready.
I don't
Looks
know.
like the entire nation? Explain that, if you will.
Well, if you read the book, it turns out that we need child care, and we need a big, energetic national government to raise our children.
I don't know if she was asked directly about this or what, so I don't know the circumstances of the interview. I do find that it's sort of uncomfortable when people reveal so much about their personal lives.
Why do you suppose they did?
I don't know the answer to that. I do find it interesting, though, that there are an awful lot of women in their late 40s who are sort of trying to create their own grandchildren. And I think that part of this must just be a failure on the part of our children not to produce.
But you see, whatever the reason,
you got time for about
whatever
two
the reason,
sentences.
they've
It's
got
a
us
short.
again, because we can't be against children, and we can't be against couples who want children having them, whether they adopt them. So they're doing the right thing, and I want to, my hat's off to them. I hope they have several more children.
All right, thank you. We've got
I really do.
We'll be back with a few words about how Washingtonians rob each other, even with no help from the government, in a moment.
This Week with David Brinkley, brought to you by GE. From plastics to financial services, we bring good things to life.
This GE compact fluorescent bulb gives you soft, warm light.
Take the ball, Jamie.
It's an energy-efficient bulb that lasts year after year.
Hit the ball, Jamie.
Up to 9,000 hours longer than an ordinary bulb.
Outside with the ball, Jamie.
So it won't need to be changed for about 7 years.
Hey, Jamie, how many grown-ups does it take to change a light bulb? Change a light bulb? Why would anybody need to change a light bulb?
The revolutionary GE compact fluorescent bulb.
This is my client, Jack. He tries not to get emotionally involved in anything he invests in. Checks his email twice a day, even on Sunday. Wishes his assets could grow as fast as his kids. Knows enough about money to realize he doesn't know everything. Knowing what matters to Jack is how I know what matters with his investments.
Something we often take for granted would take about 50% more of our disposable income if we lived in France, and 400% more if we lived in India. But here in America, this thing that is so basic to life is still a bargain: food. We have more of it and spend less for it than any other country in the world, thanks to the farmers who raise our crops and the people who process them. At the Archer Daniels Midland Company, we're helping America use its agricultural abundance to not only meet our needs for food, but those of the rest of the world as well, by producing a wide array of flours, sweeteners, vegetable oils, and functional soy protein products. Products that will help keep our most essential purchases affordable. So look at it this way: if you lived anywhere else in the world, the cost of food would be a lot harder to swallow.
Monday, one critic calls it the costliest, most ridiculous aspect of the presidency. Find out what it is. It's Your Money on ABC's World News Tonight.
Finally, outside of Washington in the Virginia and Maryland countryside is some real country, pretty pleasant. Here people raise fruits and vegetables in their backyards and on garden plots set aside by the county governments for a small fee. I'm indebted to the Washington Post for these details. This countryside is all beautifully rural and altogether pleasing, but for one problem. When the vegetables you have raised are ripe and perfect and ready for the table, very often they're stolen out of the garden. This is not the kind of dispute the American people associate with Washington. One woman planted a concealed camera in her vegetable patch and caught a neighbor stealing and complained bitterly, "She even stole my black-eyed peas." For all of us at ABC News, until next week, thank you.
This Week with David Brinkley is a presentation of
Percent financing. You can even get special low-payment leases on these luxury Buicks. But hurry, Buicks Go for the Green savings ends June 1st.
It pays to go with the winners.
It's morning, a new day to start fresh.
You only get one chance at today.
Start it off with News Center 6, weekday mornings at 6. Experience you can trust.